The sound came before the words did. A sharp clap of a manager's hand hitting the edge of a marble table. Too loud for a place this expensive, too rough for a room built on whispers. Every fork paused in midair. Every glass stopped moving. The silence didn't soften the moment. It sharpened it. The dining room was the kind of quiet money buys. Crystal glasses, catching soft light. Music low enough to sound like a heartbeat. Men in tailored jackets leaning back like they owned the air. Women laughing softly, careful not to disturb the illusion. Power was comfortable here. Power was fed here. And power rarely had to look at the people who served it. The waitress stood frozen beside a table near the center of the room. Her shoulders were tense, her spine straight, her chin lifted just enough to hide the fear pressing up her throat. One hand rested on her stomach without her realizing it. 8 months pregnant, heavy, swollen feet hidden in worn black shoes, a body working harder than it should have to. She had been on her feet since sunrise. She had smiled through cramps, through back pain, through customers who snapped their fingers instead of saying her name. The manager didn't lower his voice. He didn't lean in. He wanted the room to hear him. "We don't need liabilities here," he said, loud and clear. His eyes flicked to her stomach like it was a stain. "Customers come here for perfection." The word hung in the air. Perfection. As if she hadn't delivered it every single night. He reached for her apron and pulled it from her waist. Not gently. Not privately. It came away with a soft rip of fabric and dignity. A badge torn off in front of witnesses. The name stitched on it bent and wrinkled in his hand. Her name? The one customers used when they asked for her section? The one written on employee schedules she memorized because she never missed a shift. Few diners looked down at their plates. Others suddenly found their phones very interesting. One woman lifted her wineglass and took a slow sip, eyes fixed straight ahead. No one spoke. No one stood. Silence, thick and practiced, filled the space. Where courage should have been, in the corner booth, a man slowly set down his fork. He didn't rush. He didn't react the way people expect when they imagine billionaires in stories like this. No shouting, no dramatic gasp. Just a small, deliberate movement, fork to plate. Plate untouched, appetite gone. His eyes had been following the waitress. Long before the manager raised his voice, he had noticed how she moved carefully, protecting her body while still serving others. How she remembered orders without writing them down. How she smiled even when her back tightened with pain. Everyone, in Espanol his face. His name appeared in magazines. On buildings, on donation plaques. But in that moment, he wasn't a billionaire. He was just a man watching another human being get stripped of her livelihood in public. The waitress tried to speak. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I've never missed a shift," she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake, but it was thin, like it had been stretched too far. "I cover weekends, holidays. Customers ask for me. I just need a little time." The manager waved a hand, impatient. "This isn't a charity. We can't afford risks." Risks. As if the life inside her was a threat to the balance. Sheet Security took one step closer. Just one. But it was enough. Enough to tell her this conversation was over. Enough to tell her she had already lost. She nodded. Not because she agreed. Because fighting would only make it worse. She reached for the apron, then stopped herself. There was nothing left to grab. Her hands hovered in the air for a second, unsure what to do now that her purpose had been taken from her. She turned and walked toward the door. She didn't cry. That was the part that hurt the most. No tears. No scene. Just a slow, steady walk. Past tables that suddenly felt farther apart. Her shoes made soft sounds against the floor. Each step carried the weight of unpaid rent, unopened bills, and a future that had just narrowed without warning. She held her head high, but her shoulders were heavy, like she was carrying more than one life alone. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. Then it closed behind her. The room exhaled. Conversations restarted in low tones. Someone laughed too loudly, trying to break the tension. A waiter refilled a glass as if nothing had happened. The illusion of perfection stitched itself back together. But not for the man in the corner booth. Something tightened in his chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something heavier. A familiar feeling he hadn't felt in years. The feeling that came when he realized he had just witnessed something wrong, and expensive silence had tried to bury it. He looked around the room, at the people who could afford to look away. At the systems polished enough to hide cruelty in plain sight. Adds a manager, already smiling again, already moving on. He thought about power, how it worked, how it chose who mattered and who didn't, how easily it pretended not to see outside. The waitress stood on the sidewalk for a moment before moving. She rested both hands on her stomach. Now the baby kicked. A reminder, a promise, a responsibility. that didn't care about dress codes or profit margins. She swallowed hard and started walking. She didn't know where she was going yet. Dust away. Inside, the billionaire sat very still. The room looked the same, sounded the same, but something had shifted. A line had been crossed, not just for her, for him. He realized something ugly had happened in full view of wealth and comfort. And everyone who could have stopped it had chosen not to. Everyone except him. He picked up his napkin, folded it carefully, and placed it on the table. His eyes never left the door the waitress had walked through. Not because he felt sorry for her, but because he understood something in that moment. This wasn't over. Not even close. Morning came without mercy. No alarm, no rush to catch a bus. Just light slipping through thin curtains and landing on boxers that didn't belong there yesterday. The waitress sat on the edge of her bed and listened to the quiet, iridescent, peaceful. He was loud with fear, loud with questions that had no answers. Yet, her tiny apartment felt smaller now, like the walls were leaning in, reminding her that time had run out. She folded clothes slowly, one hand bracing her lower back as the baby shifted inside her. Rent was overdue. The notice was still taped crooked on the door, corners peeling like it had already given up. Her savings account was empty. She checked it anyway, like the numbers might change out of pity. They didn't. There was no partner asleep beside her, no one in the kitchen making coffee, just her, a life growing inside her. In a world that had decided she was on her own. By noon, the restaurant had already moved on. Her name was gone from the schedule, erased clean, like she had never trained new hires, like she had never stayed late to close. Late she had never smiled through cramps and back pain and swollen feet. Another name sat where hers used to be. Someone younger, someone not showing, someone easier. She went back for her final paycheck because she had no choice. Pride doesn't pay rent. The bell above the door chimed when she walked in, and for a second, her body reacted before her mind did. Shoulders straight, smile ready. Then she remembered. She didn't belong here anymore. The manager didn't look up when she stepped into his office. Papers shuffled. Keyboard clicks. He slid the envelope across the desk without meeting her eyes. "You should have planned better," he muttered, like he was talking about bad weather. She stood there for a moment, waiting. For what? She didn't know. An apology, a pause, anything human. It didn't come. The sentence followed her out the door, clinging to her like a smell she couldn't wash off. You should have planned better. As if life ever gives warnings. As if motherhood was a mistake instead of a miracle. Across town, in a room lined with glass and steel, the billionaire stared out at the city and felt restless in a way money couldn't fix. The image wouldn't leave him. Her hand on her stomach, the apron torn away, the way she walked out without crying. He had built companies. From nothing, he knew numbers. He knew leverage. But this wasn't about profit. It was about something simpler. Right and wrong. And wrong had been dressed up and served with a smile. He asked questions. Quiet ones. Not the kind that make noise. The kind that make people uncomfortable. Who was she? How long had she worked there? Why was there no warning? No write-ups number? Record of poor performance. The answers came back one by one, each worse than the last. She had trained half the floor staff. She covered shifts no one else wanted. Holidays, weekends, double shifts. Customers requested her by name. Reviews mentioned her warmth, her patience, her care, and still, the moment her pregnancy could no longer be hidden, she became a problem. Discarded? The billionaire leaned back in his chair and let the word sink in. He had seen it before. In factories, in boardrooms, in places where people were reduced to costs and risks. But seeing it happen so casually, so publicly, did something to him. It reminded him of where power comes from. And what it does when no one challenges it. Meanwhile, the waitress was learning how quickly doors close when you start to show. She went to interviews wearing her best dress, smoothing the fabric over her belly, trying to make herself smaller. Smiles changed the moment eyes dropped. Questions ended early. "We'll call you," they said, already knowing they wouldn't. One manager didn't even bother to hide it. "We need someone who can commit," he said, glancing at her stomach, like it was a countdown clock. Friends tried to help in the ways they could. Kind words, hugs, advice that sounded good but didn't fix anything. "Something will come through. God has a plan. You're strong." Strength didn't pay the electric bill. Faith didn't buy diapers. She thanked them anyway, because bitterness takes energy she didn't have. At night, she'll lay awake, listening to the city outside her window. Sirens, cars, life moving forward without her. The baby kicked again, and this time she couldn't hold it in. Tears came fast and hot. She pressed her forehead to her stomach and whispered apologies into the dark. For not being able to promise more, for not knowing how to protect them both, for bringing a child into a world that measured worth by convenience. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I promise, I'm trying." She fell asleep like that, hands wrapped around her belly, heart heavy with a lie society had taught her to. Well, that motherhood had made her disposable, that her value ended the moment she needed care instead of providing it. Back across town, the billionaire stood from his desk and made a decision. He didn't call his assistant. He didn't schedule a meeting. He put on his coat and walked out. Some injustices don't need committees. They need presence. The restaurant looked the same when he returned. Lights warm. Tables full. Laughter low. The illusion still intact. The manager smiled when he saw him, eager, nervous, unaware of the storm standing in front of him. To him, this was just another powerful customer. Another chance to impress. He had no idea that the silence he relied on was about to break. The injustice was no longer invisible, and when silence finally ends, it never does so quietly. The moment the billionaire stood up, the room felt it before it saw it. Chairs stopped moving. Forks paused mid their conversations, thinned into whispers, and then disappeared completely. Power recognizes power, and something had just shifted. The manager noticed too. He moved fast, smiles stretched tight, the kind of smile meant to calm storms before they break. "Sir, everything okay?" he asked, voice polished, hands already sweating. The billionaire didn't answer him. Not right away. He straightened his jacket slowly, deliberately, like he was giving the room time to understand what was coming. His eyes moved across the dining room, over faces that had watched a woman be humiliated days earlier and chosen silence. Then he spoke, calm and even. "I'd like to speak to the owner." The smile on the manager's face faltered. "Just for a second," he laughed lightly, as if this were a misunderstanding. "Of course, sir." But the billionaire cut him off with a look. Now the owner was called. Then, without raising his voice, the billionaire asked for the names of the investors. He asked who handled human resources. He asked to see employee records. Not later. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Each request landed heavier than the last. The manager's confidence began to leak away, dripping onto the floor with every step he took backward. This was no longer customer service. This was accountability. Excuses came fast, policies, procedures, company standards. The billionaire listened, nodding, letting them talk themselves into corners. Then he started asking questions that didn't have easy answers. Why was a pregnant employee fired without warning? Why were there no performance write-ups? Why were complaints from staff never escalated? Files were opened, emails pulled, dates checked. And right there, under bright lights and polished ceilings, the truth showed itself. Labor laws had been ignored, discrimination documented, complaints buried under layers of convenience and silence. The restaurant's perfect image cracked, and what spilled out wasn't pretty. The manager's face drained of color. His voice got smaller. His authority shrank with every exposed detail. People at nearby tables leaned in, pretending not to listen, hanging on every word. Then the billionaire did something no one expected. He asked for the waitress. Not the pregnant girl, not the former employee. He said her name, clear, respectful, human. It echoed through the room, and for a moment, no one moved. The hostess blinked, confused, then hurried toward the back. When the waitress came out, she looked like she was bracing for another blow. Same worn coat she had walked out in days ago. Same guarded eyes. She didn't know why she was here. Only that powerful people rarely call you back to say sorry. She stood near the entrance, hands folded over her stomach, ready to leave at the first sign of disrespect. The room watched her now. Really watched her. The woman they had ignored before. The woman whose dignity had been tested and held. The billionaire walked toward her. Not fast, not slow. He didn't tower over her. He didn't put on a show. He stopped at a respectful distance and spoke quietly, but everyone heard him anyway. He told her he had seen what happened, that he had watched how she carried herself when she was treated like she didn't matter, how she didn't beg, how she didn't break, how she walked out with her head high when others would have fallen apart. He didn't apologize loudly. He didn't need to. His words were steady, honest. He told her work spoke for itself, that her silence in the face of humiliation wasn't weakness, it was strength. That dignity under pressure is something money can't buy. Then he offered her more than her job. Becky offered her security, paid maternity leave, full benefits, legal support if she wanted it, a guarantee that her position would be waiting for her when she was ready. Not because she was pregnant, because she was excellent. The room gasped softly, like it had forgotten how to breathe. The manager stared, mouth open, hands useless at his sides, but the billionaire wasn't finished. He turned, voice still calm, still controlled, and made the announcement that snapped the balance of power clean in half. "I've acquired the restaurant group," he said, effective immediately. The words landed like thunder. Management was terminated on the spot. Policies were suspended. New ones would be written. Not for optics, for protection. The owner's face went pale. Red Vesters whispered urgently. The manager looked like the floor had dropped out from under him. Everything he had hidden behind authority was gone. The waitress didn't cry. That surprised everyone. She stood taller instead, shoulders back, chin lifted, not because she had been saved, but because she had been seen. Really seen. For the first time since her stomach began to show, someone had looked at her and seen value instead of inconvenience. The billionaire nodded to her, a quiet acknowledgement. No cameras, no applause, just a moment of truth between two people who understood what had almost been taken from her. The power that once crushed her now stood exposed, stripped of excuses and smiles. And the people who believed pregnancy was weakness were learning, in real time, how wrong they had been. As the room buzzed with shock and disbelief, the waitress placed one hand on her stomach again. This time, it wasn't to protect. It was to promise. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be built on shame. And for the first time in days, she didn't feel small. She felt strong. And the silence that once protected injustice had finally broken. Months passed, and the restaurant no longer felt like the same place. The lights were still warm, the tables still polished, the food still expensive, but something in the air had changed. The kind of change you can't buy with new furniture or branding. It was quieter now, not with fear, but with respect. Staff spoke to each other differently. Managers listened instead of barking orders. Smiles weren't forced. They lasted longer. When the waitress returned, it wasn't because she had nowhere else to go. It was because she chose to come back. She walked through the door with her head high, no apron clutched like a lifeline, no fear tightening her chest. She wasn't there to survive anymore. She was there to lead. New hires watched her closely, noticing how she moved with confidence. Now, how she spoke with calm authority. She trained staff with patience, not power. She corrected mistakes without humiliation. She remembered what it felt like to stand where they stood. Young women gravitated toward her without realizing why. They asked questions about work, about balance, about fear. She answered honestly. She didn't promise easy paths. She promised dignity. And somehow, that mattered more. At home, her baby slept peacefully during her paid leave. Tiny chest, rising and falling. Soft breaths filling the room. The world outside didn't know this child yet. Didn't know how close their future had come to being shaped by rejection and silence. The baby didn't know about boardrooms or managers or policies rewritten overnight. All they knew was warmth, safety. A mother who could finally rest without counting hours or worrying about tomorrow. The billionaire never turned it into a story about himself. There were no interviews, no speeches, no posts demanding praise. He didn't stand on stages talking about change. He built it into the walls, into contracts, into systems that would outlive him. Policies that protected workers before they needed protection. Clear lines drawn where power could no longer hide behind silence. When someone finally asked him why he did it, really asked him, he didn't pause for drama. He didn't smile. He said one thing: talent doesn't disappear because life happens. Then he went back to work. The former manager learned a lesson the hard way. Calls weren't returned. Doors didn't open. Reputation follows behavior, even when authority is gone. The confidence that once came from power couldn't protect him now. He had to sit with the consequences of choices he once made casually. No audience, no excuses. Meanwhile, the waitress thrived. Not because a billionaire rescued her, not because luck suddenly found her, but because someone with power chose not to look away when it mattered. Because dignity was treated like a right, not a reward. She earned her place the same way she always had, with work, with grace, with strength that had been there long before anyone noticed. The story spread, slowly at first, not as gossip, not as scandal, as something quieter. A reminder passed between people who had been overlooked before. That power reveals who we are when no one forces us to act. That dignity doesn't come from titles or money. It comes from how we treat people when we think no one important is watching. Somewhere between dinner, rushes, and quiet mornings. Between a baby's soft breathing and a restaurant learning how to be human again, a truth settled in. Real wealth isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by what you protect, by who you stand up for, by the systems you change so others don't have to beg for fairness. Because sometimes, one decision made in silence doesn't just change a moment, it echoes through an entire lifetime.